Do you have boxes of old photographs and are not sure what to do with them? Stay tuned for scanning tips and hints on how to incorporate them into your family history research. It's very important to take the time and scan your family photographs. So often, time and environmental conditions will deteriorate them, as well as family members may forget who are in them. So the sooner you can get these photographs scanned and the information pertaining to them attached to them, the better off you're going to be. Why even bother digitizing? Why don't we just talk about how to notate the photographs? Well, there's a few wonderful things with digitizing. One, it makes it so much easier to share with family members. You can easily send them, share a Dropbox folder, put them on a flash drive. There's lots of ways that you can share family photographs with your family. The other thing that it does is it protects them against loss, because the reality is things happen in our lives that we wouldn't wish on anybody. But there may be a flood in our house, or heaven forbid our house might catch on fire. Things happen, and there are so many wonderful, precious photographs that have been lost over time. And when you scan them and then distribute them to your whole family, there's going to be so many copies of them, they're never going to get lost. So my recommendation is scan those photographs. Before we get into the specifics, though, of scanning, I do want to talk a little bit about safe ways to label your photographs. There's a couple of things you can do. First of all, you can just write very carefully on the back of a photograph in pencil what that photograph is about. Make sure it's not a really sharp pencil, because sometimes that can go through. But anyway, I recommend pencil. It lasts, and it shouldn't do any damage to the photograph. If you don't want to do that, you can always list the information in the photograph in a spreadsheet or on a separate sheet of paper and keep that attached with the photograph. The risk is that those two things may be separated at some point, and then people won't know who's in the photograph. Include information in that description, such as maybe where the photograph was taken, what time period the photograph was taken in, or the date, specific date if you know it. Those things can be very helpful in the future. Now, on to digitizing. What equipment do you need? It really kind of depends on how serious you want to be about it, and where you might use your equipment, and also what types of photographs you have. Do you have large photographs? Do you have stacks and stacks of the smaller, 3x5s? Do you have a bunch of film? Do you have slides? Do you have negatives? That all can affect what kind of equipment that you want. So let's talk first about different equipment options and what might work for you. I know as a professional genealogist, you might think that I have a really expensive scanner, but I don't. I use my all-in-one most of the time. I do have a portable scanner, a small portable scanner that I take with me when I go on research trips, and I really love that. But I have not spent a lot of money on an expensive scanner and haven't had a problem with what I've been using thus far. A simple all-in-one printer and scanner can do a good job. The technology has improved, I can't talk today. The technology has improved so much that those printers and scanners give you a lot of options, and they're really pretty good. Quite frankly, that's what I use most of the time, is the printer scanner that I have sitting here around on my desk. So don't feel like you have to go out and spend a bunch of money on something fancy. You really don't. If you do want to get a different kind of printer or scanner, I would recommend you look below in the show notes for a link to a CNET review of scanners, which is a good review of the different types of scanners and advantages and disadvantages of each. But let me point out a couple of things as well. Make sure that the scanner that you buy has the ability to change settings. It's not all completely automated. Automation is great, and I'm a big fan, but when you're scanning for genealogy purposes, you want to be able to make some changes to the settings of your scanner. I also recommend that you look at scanners that can scan multiple images. And what I mean by that is if it's a flatbed scanner, which I recommend, then you can put multiple photographs on that screen. And then the software in the scanner will scan the individual images separately, making each one a separate JPEG or TIFF or whatever photograph. That's a big time saver, and it's one that you'll be very glad that you did in the long run. Some have better technology on that than others. I've had better luck with Epsons than I've had with Brothers, but again, technology is constantly changing, so just do your research. There are also some scanners that allow you to scan negatives and slides. However, I caution you, the more inexpensive scanners frequently only allow you to scan a particular size negative, like 35 millimeter, and you're going to encounter negatives that are maybe different sizes. And sometimes that technology doesn't work really well. There are some other options for handling negatives and slides that may be more beneficial for you and might be quite a lot easier for you if you don't try to scan negatives and slides yourself. So let's get into some of those suggestions right now. You can rent a scanner that allows you to scan slides. They can be really expensive if you buy them, but renting one will be like $300 or $400 maybe for a week. Again, that's quite a bit of money, but they can handle things more quickly, and they will then be, you'll be able to go through a lot. So if you're wanting to rent something, make sure you get everything in order prior to renting it. Take a long weekend or something like that. You can do a ton of scanning during that time period. Some scanners that you rent also have a feeder if you have a bunch of like 3x5s that you can then run them through and then do that. I do not recommend using a feeder for your precious family photographs, though. If it's something that really matters to you, put it on a flatbed and scan it. In the show notes, you'll see that I've added a link to the company that I've used to scan some of my family documents. They have great sales, so watch for those. And you can send in all kinds of things to them. They can be photographs, they can be slides or negatives, they can be 8mm films, cassette tapes, even the little mini cassette tapes. They can be VHS recordings, and they'll digitize it for you. Another thing to take into consideration, if you don't want to drop a lot of money on renting a scanner and you don't want to spend a lot of money and you have maybe a lot of slides or something like that, is to check with your local library. A lot of local libraries now have materials that you can use there on site. The Family History Library in Salt Lake City, Utah has quite a bit of equipment that you're able to use at no cost. And a lot of other libraries do too, as well as universities in your area. So your local library may not have something, but the university around you might. So if you have a lot of stuff you need to take care of, I would recommend you looking into that. So let's get into some of our scanning tips. First of all, make sure that you always scan in color. Don't scan in grayscale or black and white, even if the photograph is black and white. You want to scan in color. It will give you more options down the road to do with that photograph, and you're going to get a better scan. Try not to touch your photographs and negatives, obviously, when you're scanning them, because your fingerprints can show up on those photographs and be caught in the scan and reduce the quality of the image. So when you're handling your photographs, particularly those precious ones, try to handle I'm really having a hard time today. Try to handle them by the edges of the photograph. Also, sometimes photographs have things that have been written at the bottom of the photograph around the edges. Make sure you catch that information when you make a scan of your photograph. You can always edit the photograph later and take that material out, but make sure your original scan has that information in it as well. You'll be glad later on that you did that. The format you use to save your images is really important, and a lot of people don't understand the differences, so let's talk about those now. I actually scan my documents or my photographs for my family in two formats. I scan in a TIFF format and I scan in a JPEG. I do these two scans at the same time. It saves me a lot of time. I scan it once in one format and then I just scan it again in the second format. And let me explain the different formats and some of the advantages and disadvantages of each. Let's start with talking about the advantages and disadvantages of images recorded in TIFF, TIFF. Advantages. TIFF photographs and images are widely supported. They retain more detail and original compression, meaning there's no degradation. Some of the disadvantages, though, are they're not supported by web browsers and internet programs. Also, a TIFF document tends to be really large in size. JPEGs, JPEG, or sometimes you see the extension JPG, refer to images that people are probably most common with. The advantages of JPEGs are they have superior compression, which is variable, so that it allows you to control your file size and therefore make something maybe a little bit smaller to upload to a particular site that has a size limit. And pretty much everybody accepts JPEG images. The disadvantages, though, is there's a degradation whenever you edit or even just resave the file. My recommendation is that you scan in TIFF format and in JPEG. But let me talk about another possibility for you as well. Some people scan as a PNG. That format will allow you to drop the background, which can be really helpful if you want to put a picture into something else. One term that really kind of hitches people up when they're scanning is DPI, which stands for dots per inch, and they really don't have any idea what size to scan their photographs. My recommendation to you is to absolutely never scan something that you care about in your family history in less than 300 DPI. That is my absolute lowest recommendation. I recommend that you scan your documents in 600 DPI or larger if you want to perhaps make a blow up, make a large print of something later. You can even scan higher than 600. Again, don't forget to scan in color, not grayscale or black and white. Please help me out and hit your like button if you're getting value from this. So let's go on and now talk about the ways that we can label these documents so that we can keep the information that we've gathered about these pictures. Things aren't like they used to be where names have to be really short, which is great because now we can add more information to a name. And so I tend to just include a lot of information in my name because it will stick with it. Now, how do I name my photographs? If there's only one person in the photograph, it's easier. But if there's more than one person in the photograph, then it's a little bit more difficult. This is how I handle it. I look at the main person in that photograph that pertains to me and my family history. Or I'll put the head of the family if they're in the photograph. They will be the first name in the photograph. And the way that I name my photographs is last name, comma, first name. And then I'll put a dash, and then I'll put the information about the photograph, like where it was taken, or if it was their baby photograph. And I'll include the date of the photograph if I know it at the very end. Sometimes information is written on the back of the photograph. And if that's the case, I scan both the front and the back of the photograph, and then I label them. Another way to add information is through the metadata that's attached to the image. This doesn't require a special program, but beware because sometimes information added doesn't stick when it's transferred from one platform or even programmed to another. For instance, if you work on a Mac and then you try to open up an image that you've saved on a pen drive on a Windows computer, the metadata may not have remained intact. That's why I think the name of the photograph is really important because that's not going to change depending on the platform or whatever that you're using. On a PC, you can right-click on the image and select Properties, and then you can add photographic information via the Details tab. On a Mac, you can right-click, and then you can add additional information via the Comments. One other way to add information to a photograph is to use the Paint program. That way, you open up an image, and then underneath the image, you write the information that you want included in the photograph, and then you re-crop the image and save the image. That way, that information is neatly written at the bottom of the photograph. Finally, make multiple copies. Share it to the cloud. Make backup discs. Share it with your family. And also, please share it with the public at large if you're comfortable doing so. Photographs are rare, particularly as we move back in time. And when somebody has wonderful photographs in their family history and they share them, other family members, more distant cousins and things like that, can really benefit from having an image of a grandparent that maybe they don't know anything about. And so I encourage you to go on platforms such as FamilySearch.org or Ancestry.com and input your photographs and share them with everybody. Please don't hesitate to write any questions you have in the comment section. And if you would like me to cover more things such as this, please let me know. Maybe get into a little bit more detail about how to upload photographs to Ancestry or Family Search. Just let me know and we'll add that to the list of things that we want to cover on this channel. please click on my photograph in the circle there on the right to subscribe to the channel. That way you'll know when new videos come up. Sure appreciate your support. Have a great day.